hello, and welcome to the latest episode of the Online Warriors podcast. It is June still. We're entering the back half of June. There's, once again, a lot of news to get to today. We have a jam-packed episode. Honestly, one of our most packed in a while. We had a busy one last week, too, so we're going to have to go kind of rapid fire. Luckily, I'm joined by my good friends Nerdbomber and Techtic.
Hello, hello.
Over there.
Hey, how's it going?
In the other space that I refer to as cyberspace. Guys, we're not sitting next to each other when we record this, or at least those two are, but I'm, thousands of miles away, in case you didn't know that. I'm Illeagle 86.
And I would walk
myself
5,000 miles.
I wouldn't.
Isn't it 1,000? Isn't it 1,000?
Is it? I don't know.
Or no,
it's 500.
It's 500.
It's 500,
wow.
Then 500 more, and then you're the man who walked 1,000 miles to wind up at your door.
So I just combined everything. It's fine.
Yeah. You went harder. You went 5,000, which in the end it's 10,000, which is I don't know. That's this. Is that how big is the world around? Could you walk around the whole planet? Is 10,000 miles that much, or do I not understand miles?
I feel like it's a lot.
Circumference of the world? Yeah. To start things off, I'm gonna Google that. Circumference of Earth, 24,902. So you'd almost walk halfway around the world, I guess. So we're not going to do that today. Instead, we're just going to be sitting here walking 0 miles and talking about various things. Guys, it's been a huge week. The gaming news is still just piling up. Of course, there was the EA Play Live on Thursday, running through Star Wars Squadrons gameplay, among a few other things. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about this huge news for 90s kids, even me, who didn't really play Pokemon. Pokemon Snap is getting, I guess, remastered for Switch, or remade. We'll go through that. Rocksteady is reportedly working on a Suicide Squad game, Rocksteady being the folks who worked on Arkham, if you're a fan of that franchise. And then we're going to move into some of the more pop culture-y news. This Michael Keaton news, I'm sure you've heard about. Broke, I think, today or yesterday. That's fairly recent. This trailer for Foundation, the Isaac Asimov, or Asimov, I don't really know what the best way to pronounce his name is. This is an old Isaac Asimov work that's being made for Apple TV Plus. Or is it Apple TV Plus? I think it is.
Yeah, it is.
I don't have it. So. And then we have some tech news. Mixer is shutting down. This is probably the second time you've heard of Mixer. The first time being the first time we talked about it. So we'll talk about that. And then Facebook is making some moves in the gaming community as well. So we'll get to that, assuming we have time. So let's ramp things up real quick here, and let's jump right into Pokemon Snap. Now, Pokemon Snap is an interesting thing. For those that don't know, have never played it, this was a game on the Nintendo 64 way back in the 90s. I don't know exactly when it came out. I don't have that information in front of me. Oh, 1999. I do have that information in front of me. 1999, turn of the century. Was well received by critics and fans. Everyone loved it. Even I loved it. Not a Pokemon fan. I loved it. Well, it's getting remade. It's literally right now, I guess the working title is New Pokemon Snap, which pretty simple, I guess. Being remade, of course, for the Switch. Reportedly will take you to a variety of locales, jungles, beaches, where you can research various Pokemon in their natural habitats, build a photo dex. It sounds very similar to what you had going on in the original Pokemon Snap. So first of all, did you guys play Pokemon Snap back in the day?
I did, and I loved it.
It was great. It was fair.
It was simple, and it gave you what you wanted to see.
Pokemon.
I did not play it. I always wanted to play it, but I didn't. It was it N64 or was it GameCube? I can't remember.
It was N64. I think it was right before the turn.
I didn't have either of those consoles, so I knew that I wouldn't be able to play it, and my parents would not buy me that console because I had a PlayStation 2 and multiple Game Boys, so they thought that was enough at the time, and so I never played it, but I really wanted to. So I was super pumped when I saw that they were going to make a new version of it, because now I get to go back, and if I ever get to time travel, I get to go back and look at little Nerdbomber and be like, don't worry, you'll get to play it eventually.
Did it.
In better graphics. Don't you worry.
So the thing the thing about it is, and the thing I remember most vividly is you're in this little car. Professor Oak talks to you and gives you a camera and says, go take pictures of Pokemon. The story's not important. But you get out there, and of course you see Pokemon, but you get more points for photos that you take, first of all, that are good angles, and you can see the Pokemon's faces, but also if you catch Pokemon, if you catch Charmander shooting a fireball, it's a lot of points. And if you catch a rare Pokemon that's doing something crazy, if you catch a Zapdos doing Zapdos stuff. I'm digging deep into my Pokemon knowledge here, by the way. you get a lot of points. And one way you could provoke them, Techtic, do you remember this? Is you could throw apples at them.
Yeah.
Do you remember this? It was amazing. Throw an apple at him, and it would, like, you threw an apple at Snorlax, it would wake him up, and he'd do Snorlax stuff, and you'd be able to take a picture of him, whereas otherwise he'd just be some lump sitting there. You wouldn't even know he's Snorlax. It was amazing.
So I want to touch on something Nerdbomber just said, and I quote, "With better graphics." When I watched this whole trailer, all I thought was, wow, these graphics are incredibly underwhelming. And with all of these different fan mods that you see people making with great graphics, I simply expected some quality Pokemon graphics. And it just, you have all these different drivers that they could have used and engines that they could have used to give us what we wanted from a graphic standpoint, and it just fell short. And that thing is definitely a negative for me on this.
I just want to point out, though, that, okay, it looked a little chonky, but it's still going to be infinitely better than anything that we saw in the 90s. And it's Pokemon.
True.
Like, Nintendo graphics are pretty much, any Nintendo first-party title, for the most part, is more like cutesy graphics. You're not going to see fur or anything. You're not going to see that granular level of detail. You just have to be happy for what you get.
But here's the thing. In the 90s, that was state-of-the-art 3D. Now the bar is set much higher, and they just went, we see you, bar. Not going to hit it.
Would you try to hit the bar, though, if you knew that even if you didn't, it was still guaranteed money?
I'm not asking for, high resolution fur detail. I'm asking at least be on par with the Pokemon games. And I think this even fell short of that.
Listen, all I want to do is, I hear you at the graphics. I'm in the Nerdbomber camp on this one. I'm much more interested in, like, being able to throw, remember the sleep bombs tactic? Remember those things? The little things you throw them and that pink dust would come out, and it would, I think, it would put the Pokemon to sleep, right? Wasn't that like the thing?
Yeah, that's generally what a sleep bomb does.
Right. I couldn't remember if it was a sleep bomb or like a poison bomb, or I guess it would be really more morbid if you were poisoning Pokemon. But
well, you do poison Pokemon, at least in.
But you could. Well, okay, you got me there. But you could the cart was on these tracks, and you could run it. You could like unlock secret passageways, and you'd like go in, and there's an electrode in there. Oh my, he's gonna explode! And if you got a picture of him exploding at exactly the right time, there's like 1,000 points. It was just whoever came up with that idea, by the way. Someone was like, we need a new way to do Pokemon, and someone was like, you're taking pictures of them. I don't know how you came up with that idea, but it is a winner, and you nailed it. So this one, I actually don't know if I have in front of me when this one is supposed to hit. There's no release date so far for this.
My guess is that it was a spin-off of the Safari Zone that happens in the game, because what is a Safari Zone? Where you drive through and take pictures of animals.
Could definitely be. For all we know, this could have been like one of those situations. You know how you like see studios being bought out who did a certain thing and then it gets reskinned. I mean, we talked about this kind of with Assassin's Creed, right? Where it's like a reskinned Viking game. It could have been this exact situation. But we'll see when this one comes out, being developed by Bandai Namco. No release date yet. So that's just one piece of the puzzle here. And we'll keep rolling on. Let's talk about Rocksteady. Just because that's the next tab on my Google Chrome. Not a sponsor. So you may know by now, if you've listened to this podcast for long enough, I think I was still talking about Arkham on this podcast. This was not pre-Online Warriors, but Nerdbomber and I, and Techtic, all three of us, are all big Arkham fans. Developed by Rocksteady, who now is reportedly working on a Suicide Squad game. Now, Suicide Squad, didn't see the movie, don't have a whole lot of familiarity with Suicide Squad. Nonetheless, this is a winning proposition. So
I'm super excited to see a video game from the perspective of the villain, because that's one of the things that I've always liked about the Suicide Squad in general.
Anti-hero.
Right. Well, they're basically villains who get turned into heroes by, what's her face? Help me out here.
I know
Government
who
lady.
you're thinking of.
Yeah, government lady.
Yeah.
I'm blanking on the name. But they basically
Viola
turn them
Davis.
into good guys and like make them team up. And I think that could be really fun to play, because we don't get a lot of video games where you're the bad guy. And it'll be really fun to flex a lot of these quote-unquote bad guys' powers, especially if they let you play as different members of the team. Like, I'm trying to envision how this would work. Maybe you can swap between different members based on the mission, or maybe it's more story-based and linear, where then they'll just choose which villain you get to play as the story progresses. But I'm super excited for this, because I would love to play as Deadshot. I would love to play as Harley Quinn. I feel like she's kind of an untapped character in terms of video games. I feel like she's a little bit more wily than the Joker and would be super fun to play as. And basically there's just a wealth of fun content that I can envision for this game, especially if you're taking on the Justice League, which I think one of the domains that were registered and that kind of leaked this was the Suicide Squad killed the Justice League. And obviously you probably will not succeed in the game because, let's be real, they're never going to kill off any Justice League member. Like, that's just not going to happen. But going up against members of the Justice League, like maybe it's a different alternate Earth scenario where the Justice League members are bad and you have to work with this Earth's Justice League to take down the bad Justice League members. Like, I think it could be really fun, and I'm really excited and super pumped. I don't know, but what do you guys think?
So I wanted to bring up the domain name thing you were saying. So there were a few domain names registered. The most interesting one being Suicide Squad Killed the Justice League. Perhaps relatedly, GothamKnightsGame.com was also registered around the same time. So people also are thinking there may be another Batman game in the works from Warner Brothers Montreal.
Well, I believe
who this domain name is associated with.
That was confirmed to be the game centered around the Court of Owls whole storyline.
Right, which we talked about. We talked about that a while back, didn't we?
So, I mean, that could mean that in the next 6 months to a year, we could be getting 2 Batman / Gotham University type games, which I'm super excited about.
When you think about it, you know, and granted, Arkham Knight finished a complete arc for these games, but they were such money makers. I mean, I usually don't have my ear too low to the ground on these sorts of things, but like, I know that when Arkham Knight came out, it was extremely popular. And I know that Arkham City won a bunch of Game of the Year awards. And to think that Rocksteady wouldn't want to get back to that formula in some way and back to that IP, which they presumably have access to, you know, it was only a matter of time. I do think that the proverbial flipping the script in terms of, you know, you're going to play as bad guys. I'm trying to think of other examples where this has been done. And
so the reason why I bought the third Arkham Knight, I believe it was the third, and the reason why I also said the anti-hero is because in that game there was DLC where you could play as the Red Hood, who was an anti-hero.
Right. And
although it was a really, really short section of the game, it was a whole different yet similar dynamic to the way you fought as Batman, and it gave this different perspective that I really, really loved. And that, in my opinion, was a brief synopsis of kind of what this game might actually be like, and I'm all for it.
Well, so it's actually, and I'm, you know, spoiler for my What Are You Up To Wednesday. Last of Us Part 2 has come out, and I have it, and it's absolutely incredible. And without getting spoilery, there has been at least one part so far where you play as the bad guy. And it's interesting, you know, like it's I guess in this case you don't expect it, and you would if you went up and bought Suicide Squad. But with Suicide Squad, you know, Batman has one of the most interesting rogues galleries of any superhero, right? I mean, I can't think of anyone who has a more interesting rogues gallery besides maybe Spider-Man. So to have the opportunity to play as those characters, like I honestly wish, imagine a game where you play as the Joker, right? I mean, I don't know what that would even look like because the inside of the Joker's head is messed up.
Yeah, you'd have to have like a couple chapters of just slipping deep into madness first.
Slip deep into madness and then get these frankly brilliant ideas for how to just sadistically terrorize Batman. You know, that's what the game would look like. But considering too what the arc of the Arkham series was, I'm actually now like retroactively kind of wondering why that never happened. You know, why you never played as the Joker, because it seems like something that their narratives were so closely tied together it would almost make sense. But you know, hindsight's 2020, I guess. All right, so this game, which right now I guess is just called Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. Again, no release date, no trailer here. This is very early works, just things we're hearing about, you know, things we're speculating about. This article, which is from Games Radar, says we should get an announcement, quote unquote, soon enough. But you know, who really knows? So there's apparently a big DC show coming in August, which may be the reveal point for this. Could be another holiday season thing. Could be a PS5 thing. You know, again, we're with this release of Spider-Man being touted, taking advantage of the solid state drive. I could think of a Batman or Suicide Squad centric game similarly taking advantage of that kind of stuff. So lots of hype ahead for that. Now, where are we in our crazy lineup of stuff? Of course, EA Play Live. So we talked about Star Wars Squadrons last week, did we not? Or did we not have, was it not out yet at that point? I actually can't remember. I want to say it was.
We did talk about Squadrons. They had showed like a teaser trailer, but we hadn't yet seen any gameplay. So with EA Play, we saw gameplay for the very first time.
Right. So this was, I think, like a 5-minute clip. You know, it was a gameplay trailer, so it still had a trailery feel to it. There was a voiceover describing what you're going to be able to do, what things are going to look like. And yes, it did show quite a bit of gameplay. Most notably, and spoiler alert, I'm going to rail against this. Lots of first-person cockpit gameplay. And I know that probably pleased a lot of people, especially people who are excited to play it in VR, which admittedly is a draw. I guess before I level a dissenting opinion, what were your guys' thoughts on it?
I mean, I thought the gameplay looked really cool. I thought that they did a really good job getting all of the details right in terms of the cockpit. And from a lot of I think they had the developer interview at the beginning and some of the voiceover, it really seemed like they put a lot of passion and work into the game, making sure that they got it right in terms of how it felt to fly and how it would feel to actually be in these ships. They also mentioned again and stressed again that the entire game was built and ready to implement VR. No matter what system you played on, if it was VR compatible. So I thought that was pretty cool because honestly, like I feel like that first person view in VR would make you feel like you're right there in the action. For me, I don't know how it would work because they did show a lot of like tight corners and fancy maneuvers. And honestly, that seems like it would make me sick in VR. But if you can stomach it, it would probably be very cool. And they did say that I believe there would be AI in the squads too. So if you didn't have a full like 5-person squad to get in the game with, then you wouldn't be totally SOL. So, you know, for me, that's also another perk because intelligent AI, if it actually maneuvers and interacts well with the game and plays the way that a human would, I think that's super important because a lot of these, at least online experiences, I always have trouble filling out like a full group of people to play with all at one time.
Right.
So for me, the gameplay looked absolutely awesome. I loved the fact that you can do a loop-de-loop to get behind your enemy and take them out. That is literally what I lived for. That was the best
part. Yeah, that part was awesome.
The one thing, and this is going to sound weird, and maybe I've just become spoiled with all these different, again, graphics, is the lighting at sometimes looked really, really good and really, really breathtaking. But depending on the scene, other times it made the graphics look worse. And I couldn't really put my finger as to why, but that was the only thing that I just really couldn't deal with. And I don't know why it stuck with me so much.
So first, I want to speak to some of the things Nerdbomber said because... So I know I mentioned it to you guys, I think when Squadrons first came out, because someone else mentioned to me that there is a VR experience, an X-Wing VR experience that you can get as part of Battlefront. It's free on PlayStation Plus right now. You can download it and play it. And it's exactly like this in a lot of ways. You're in a cockpit and you are, you know, in space having a dogfight with a bunch of TIE fighters, basically. And Nerdbomber, you specifically mentioned something that resonated with me having played that a couple of times, which is your field of vision is a very important thing. And like, it's funny when you watch old Star Wars movies, like when you're watching the Trench Run, for example, you can see these guys kind of looking over their shoulders and you don't even know where they're looking because there's not much to look at back there. There's like, but you find when you're playing the VR, you're doing that constantly, at least if you're me. You're trying to see where things are and you're constantly looking around, which is like, it's kind of a cool part of VR, but it also is occasionally tedious, especially when you're wearing a heavy headset. So for me, I want third person and I want it badly. And I'm not sure if they've explicitly committed at this point. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if they've committed to not having third person, but it seems like they're throwing all their weight behind, yeah, you're in the cockpit. And I understand that. I'm not sure that's going to be my kind of party. Like they're a lot of the, you know, customizable stuff they're talking about is like, oh, you can get a little Ewok bobblehead in your cockpit, which is cool. But it's also like, again, kind of they're throwing all their weight behind the cockpit thing, which, you know, the graphics look good, generally speaking. I think the gameplay is probably going to be really tight. They're also sidestepping questions, and you can see in the interviews, they're sidestepping questions about how long the campaign is going to be, and that concerns me a lot. There are some people who at this point think the campaign is going to be basically an extended training mission that's going to be over in like 2 hours, and then you're kind of SOL. I mean, you can play online, of course, but as a very campaign-forward gamer, you know, this is why I think last week when we talked about this, I just want a Rogue Squadron. Just give me let me go to the second Death Star and, you go to the shield generator with the Millennium Falcon. That's all I ever want. And instead we're getting first person only sequel trilogy content with no original trilogy, prequel trilogy content. And for $40, I probably will buy it, but
And no
what I'm saying is I'm not going to be happy about it. Okay, no microtransaction is good, and of course EA's learned their lesson. They're so upfront about that it hurts. They're like, I think at one point in the trailer they literally had, or is it the trailer or the interview? They said all you have to do to unlock stuff is play the game. It was like they act like they discovered this revolutionary technique for developing a good game. I thought that was funny. But yeah, they're being very upfront about that, which is good. I like the idea of either describing the classes of ships you can have. I'll tell you right now, I would be an A-wing TIE interceptor kind of guy. I don't know. Have you thought about it at all? Either of you?
I don't think I have enough experience on the arsenal that is the different ships I can have.
I feel like I'd want to play around because I feel like even though I would have one necessarily in mind, every time I play a game, if I even have a character in mind, I end up diving in and then realize I made a mistake and I end up actually falling in love with something else completely different than I thought. So I'll probably end up, because for $40, it seems like it's a pretty good experience. And whether you love or hate EA, lately they've been putting out relatively tight games, I think. And so I think for $40 we'll end up getting it, and I'll probably end up just playing around with all of them.
I do hope for ridiculous DLC, like you can drive the Millennium Falcon or a Honda Civic, things like that.
Right. But Fallen Order was EA too, right?
Yes.
And that was very well received by most people, I would say. I still haven't played it yet. We had our good friend Ben on to talk about it a while back, and he was gushing over it. It seems awesome. So they've built up a bit of a stride here. In spite of what happened in Battlefront 2, I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt simply because it's Star Wars, unfortunately. But I don't know. I'm worried, And to go back to the ships thing, they talked about this U-wing, which is like the help your friends ship. It's like repair your friend. It's like I would not want to be the person in the squadron that's stuck with the U-wing, because is the way it works? You're 5 people. You have to be 5 different things. Is that? Or is it 6 people? I can't remember if it's 6 or 5.
I don't know that they would limit what you can pick. It's like any strategy in any game. You can have all tanks, or you can have each person with a different class.
Well, and that might be the coolest part of all of this, right? Is this idea that you can, what they're saying is you can, before a mission, the ins and outs of it, and you can plan, okay, here's what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to do X and Y, and then go do it. And I think that's cool. I mean, how many Star Wars movies have a scene like that where it's like, okay, Death Star's here. We have to go here and do the X and Y and do this. So that could be really cool too. It has a lot of potential. There were certain things from the gameplay trailer that I wanted to see, that I desperately wanted to see, that I didn't. So I guess we'll know more when this comes out. October 2nd, I think, is when this comes out. October sometime. I believe it's October 2nd. So be on the lookout for that one. So EA didn't just, spend hours at their Play Live talking about Star Wars Squadrons. They also were touting some other games, and one of those is a very co-op focused game called It Takes Two. And Tactic, apparently being a fan of A Way Out, which I started and never finished, by the way, wants to talk a little bit more about this one, so I'm going to swing it over to him.
So not only did this game remind me of A Way Out with regards to its working together with your partner with a couch co-op, but also it reminded me of a game called Unraveled, which is a side-scroller type game, and you're also these little cutesy things. And between Nerdbomber and I, games like this, we are 150% here for, because 1, couch co-op is never dead, and 2, they're so cute, and I could just play those kind of games forever. So thank you, EA, for having those kind of games. I'm all for It Takes Two.
Yeah, they did show Lost in Random too was their other, I think they call them EA originals. But I do always like seeing these because they're kind of like indie titles, but they have the funding and the backing of EA. And they always end up being like kind of fun, little interesting game experiences. And so pretty stoked about that. I think everything else though in EA, the entire EA Play Live was just like, this is coming to Steam. This is coming to Steam. And here's an hour of Apex. And that's going to have Steam access too.
So before we move on, it's worth asking, we've mentioned Battlefront 2 as a major debacle. What's your guys' general opinion of EA? Because EA is a game studio or developer, I guess, I'm not sure which there, that people, gamers love to hate. I will say, as someone who never really got into Battlefront 2, I felt a little bad receiving it as a gift because I didn't want to give them my money after everything I heard about the microtransactions, but I also don't harbor any ill will towards them as a company. Do you guys have a reason to like detest EA right now?
I don't generally dislike EA. I think like any major publisher, they have their follies. I think my only moments where I really disliked them, besides like microtransaction-y type things, was when they bought BioWare. Things kind of started to go off the rails for BioWare, and they used to make some of my favorite games, and ever since EA took them over, things have kind of been a little disappointing. And I don't know, that's kind of my only misgiving towards EA. Whenever a studio gets acquired by them, in my head I kind of groan a little bit because I'm like, oh, EA is going to meddle with it and mess up whatever they were doing well. But other than that, like, I don't know, I feel like I know them for a lot of sports games. I know them for like Battlefront and stuff like Apex. I mean, Apex has been well received. I think they're starting to turn their reputation around a little bit. I think they're trying to be a little bit more consumer friendly and removing some of the microtransactions and the follies. But until BioWare really gets its feet back on the ground, I'm always going to be a little salty towards EA.
You jogged my memory because they bought Visceral. I hate them. You're right. I hate them.
Every time they acquire a really good studio, they like run it into the ground. It makes me so sad.
Yeah. They bought Visceral, maker of Dead Space and Dead Space 2, and then they made Dead Space 3, which was just not as good. It was still fine, but it wasn't as good. So, yeah, you're right. Wow, that just happened so suddenly. I guess I hate them. When I think of EA, I tend to think of a lot of what you said, of like the kind of their golden age of like, remember back in like the early 2000s, they were pretty much just known for sports games as far as I know.
EA Sports.
They did great with those. I think they also did... they might have done Need for Speed Most Wanted too, which is one of my favorite games. So they had a good stretch, and then they hit some bumps in the road. But it would be cool to see them, get it back together. We're rooting for you, EA, but don't buy BioWare and don't buy Visceral. We'd still like you, I guess, is the moral tactic. Anything to add to that?
No, I think you guys covered it. I think we can move on to the next topic.
Well, so we should, and I was about to move on before mentioning this. Some of the biggest game news of the week that I almost forgot: Crash Bandicoot 4. Which I have never, confession, I've never played a Crash Bandicoot game except for in
so good.
So in Uncharted 4, they have a mini game where as Nathan Drake you play Crash Bandicoot, and that's like it's ironically the closest I've ever come to playing Crash Bandicoot. Because is Crash Bandicoot also Naughty Dog? Is that why they did that, or is it just a weird crossover thing? I don't know.
It's not Naughty Dog.
Oh man,
I wouldn't think it's
Naughty
Dog.
I think it might be Naughty Dog. On the fly researching. Here we go. Oh, my Face ID is not picking me up.
But Crash Bandicoot 4 is coming. That's the moral of the story here. I have never played it. I don't even understand watching the trailer. I'm not 100% sure I know what it is.
It's just a smash and run type
you're running.
game. Yeah.
Yeah, you're always running forward and you're hitting crates.
So confirmed it is Naughty Dog.
The gist of it.
What it is.
Okay, that's what I thought.
The graphics look good. The character options look good. You can even play as Corvo, which is awesome. There's new mask and things like that. I'm for it. I've been waiting for a new one for quite some time. I was always a Crash Bandicoot fan, and back in the day, if I had to pick between Spyro and Crash, I pick Crash.
So I'm kind of excited for this just because, I mean, they're kind of tongue-in-cheek with the name of the game. It's about time because I feel like, it's been 20 years since the last mainline installment into the franchise. And it's kind of weird to me that it's releasing now because it is releasing for this gen of consoles. And the other weird thing to me, and I know that the Crash Bandicoot Remaster Trilogy and the go-karting game have been now cross-platform, and they're not a PlayStation exclusive, but Crash Bandicoot was always like that pinnacle PlayStation exclusive game, so it's a little strange to me to just see this being a cross-platform title and to not have it be debuting on the new console, because I feel like if they just held out a few more months, it would have been a baller PlayStation 5 exclusive. Not that I love exclusive games, but as we talked about last week, it helps sell your console. And there's like Crash Bandicoot and the PlayStation 2 kind of go hand in hand in my mind, or was it the PlayStation 1? I don't even know.
I think it was the PlayStation 1, but I agree with you. I think, and they probably were kicking themselves when they saw the Ratchet and Clank reveal, and were like, wow, it was so well received. We could have done the same thing. It is interesting that they didn't. I want to backtrack a little bit. Techtic, you said Corvo? Did you mean Cortex?
Yes, I meant Cortex.
I was like, is he talking about Dishonored 3? And he's not sure where we are. But yeah, I've never played the games. I did a quick Google. I assumed you were talking about Cortex. So yeah, you can play as the main antagonist apparently in this game. So that's pretty cool. It's a what do you call it before? A run and smash?
Yeah, run and smash.
You know? Yeah, it's a classic
and a couple
3D
spins.
platformer.
You could spin too.
I'm really pumped seeing this and the Ratchet and Clank game reveal, in addition to how well the Spyro remaster did as well. I feel like this is a resurgence of the 3D platformer, and growing up, those were my favorite. I feel like I wasn't really into the FPSs or anything like that early on, and I didn't really get into deep RPGs. So like the 3D platformer was where I was at when I was 10 years old, and I loved it. So to see these games kind of making a resurgence, getting the whole brand new console, brand new gen graphical overhaul, and just making them feel and play like they're next gen, man, I'm so pumped.
We just need a Banjo-Kazooie.
And Jack and Daxter. I would love to see that series resurrected. Oh, and Sly Cooper. Bring them all back.
Remember they remade Banjo-Kazooie on the 360? I got all excited, and then it was like totally different. But yeah, if they just, honestly, just a remaster, again, like you just said with the remasters, like it is cool seeing these things come back. It does kind of lead you to this conclusion that like we spent decades just taking games and making them as complex as possible. And then at some point someone was like, wait a second, like you said, like I played this game in the 90s that was like run and smash crates and it was the greatest. So like, let's just do that. Like it saves them a lot of work and like it's still satisfying. So it's cool to see games like that come back.
Dude, it's so hard. Like they're so simple, but they're so freaking hard.
Well, right. If you play like some of the hardest games I've ever played have been like, if you go back and play like a Super Nintendo, play like Donkey Kong Country on the Super Nintendo, it's impossible. It's the simplest thing ever. It's a side scroller where you can basically just like two buttons, and I can't do it. So like the difficulty and complexity are not one and the same. And you know, it's cool to see things get a little bit simpler and harken back to simpler times too, I guess. So Crash Bandicoot, again, not sure if there's a release date for this one. I'm doing some quick Googling. October 2nd is when this one's coming. So this does have a release date. So be on the lookout for that. Right now, before we get into our other topics, we're going to take a short break. But before we do, I want to shout out our fantastic Patreon producer, Mr. Ben Checkness. Ben supports us on Patreon at the highest of our 3 levels of support, which is the night level. And as a result, he gets a producer shout out in every episode, input into our game segment, which is coming later. And he also gets access, of course, to our monthly secret segment and vlog, in addition to, and the occasional guest spot. So if you want to be like Ben, the night level is where you find that treasure. A level below that is the Squire level, which gets you access to the monthly secret segment and vlog. And then, of course, there is the lowly page, which gets you access to the monthly secret segment. So if you want more of the details on that, you can head over to patreon.com/onlinewarriorspodcast to check out more of the details. Thanks again to Ben. We'll take a short break, and we'll be right back to talk to you about Michael Keaton.
Hey there, everybody. Seth Heasley here from the Hugo's There podcast. Every month on the podcast, I have on a guest, and we discuss their choice of the winners of the Hugo Award for Best Novel. So if you are interested in nerdy books and nerds discussing books, head over to hugospodcast.com or search for Hugo's There anywhere you get your podcasts. Thank you so much.
And we're back. In other news, Michael Keaton is in talks with Warner Brothers to play Batman in the upcoming Flash movie. Now, I have some thoughts on what this could mean. They are conflicting a little bit with the fact that this signing would mean he'd be Batman over multiple movies. But I'd like to ask what you guys think about this first before I go into my little bit far-fetched, not really plausible theory. So let's take it over to you.
Yeah, so I have a lot of questions. So you're right. There's a lot of conflict to be had here, right? Because what they seem to be saying is Michael Keaton is coming back as Batman. He's coming back as the Batman that we know from, was he Batman Forever? Batman Returns? One of the Batmans in the 90s. I can't remember which one. So he's him, presumably. But now Batfleck is done, right? That's over?
I want to say I was hearing reports that they would be open to having Ben Affleck resume his role, but then those movies or any movies that he would be in would be exclusive to HBO Max and kind of follow the Snyder Cut storyline.
Wait, okay, hold on a sec. Now I'm getting more and more confused.
Exactly.
What about Robert Pattinson?
There's it seems like there's going to be 3 threads of Batman movies, and that's terribly confusing.
So that's why I have this alternate theory that allows for multiple Batmans. So specifically what the rumor is that he is to play Batman. What it doesn't say is that he is to play Bruce Wayne. So now there's been a lot of different people that's taken on the cowl of Batman. And one theory being that Michael Keaton is older is that I was thinking maybe he's going to be the Thomas Wayne version of Batman, since it is a Flash movie. And one of the most acclaimed Flash movies was the Flashpoint Paradox, where he goes into an alternate timeline where Bruce Wayne is actually dead. That forces Thomas Wayne to take on the mantle to get vengeance on the crime. And I think that would allow for all these alternate timelines of different Batmans where Affleck is still Bruce and Michael Keaton is Thomas Wayne, but also Batman. But my problem with that is, again, that the fact that he would be signing through multiple movies. And honestly, I think the whole Thomas Wayne bit is more of a one-trick pony. But I think it could still have some interesting merits to keep all these different Bat people alive.
Well, why don't we take it a step further, though? What you're describing, I know nothing about the Flashpoint Paradox, but it sounds like the Flash is so fast that he goes into an alternate universe and discovers Thomas Wayne as Batman. Why can't he instead go so fast that he goes into an alternate universe in which Batman is still Bruce Wayne, but he looks like Michael Keaton, and he's so old he's retired? I have a hard time with Warner Brothers saying, okay, we need to get someone to play a Thomas Wayne Batman, and saying, let's get a guy who played the Bruce Wayne Batman. It's needlessly confusing, and Michael Keaton's a great actor, but if I was Michael Keaton, I also wouldn't want to play two different Batmen, right?
I feel like they're going to angle it in a way where he'll still be Bruce Wayne, and I feel like it won't be super confusing. They're going to use Flashpoint somehow to erase or maybe sideline Ben Affleck's Bruce Wayne, and I don't know, maybe he'll just disappear into the ether or something, or he'll get killed or something and be replaced by Michael Keaton Batman, and then he'll just kind of step in as the new Batman, even though he's much older than every other superhero in the Justice League at that point.
Right.
I feel like that's the route they'll go, but it's still needlessly confusing, because then is Robert Pattinson's Batman, is that a standalone trilogy? Is that confirmed then? That's not going to have any tie-in?
Yeah, that I believe is standalone. It's kind of similar to the whole Dark Knight trilogy, where that was just its own fun thing.
I know everyone loves Batman, and I get it. He's a great character, and he has a great set of villains, and Gotham is an amazing setting for a story. But have we ever paused to think that we're overdoing it at this point? When you have 3 different Batmen in circulation, maybe we need a decade off from Batman after this. Finish these storylines and then stop for a little bit.
I
don't think we need a decade off
in the mix.
I don't think we need a decade off, because if you look at Batmen through the ages, I think it's rare for us to get more than a few years off. The trouble is when you have 3 concurrently in circulation at the same time. That's what the problem is. The problem is, okay, wait, which Batman knows the Flash and which Batman is his own Batman? And wait, is Robert Pattinson's Batman just a younger version of Ben Affleck's Batman? Batman.
That's why I say
Batman, so your head explodes.
There's so much opportunity for people to play Batman that isn't Bruce Wayne. So many people have taken on the mantle. You have Dick Grayson has been Batman. You have future Batman who's been Damian Wayne. Jason Todd tried to be Batman on his own merit, but that got shut down real quick because he doesn't have the right ideals. But so many people has played Batman that you could just move off of Bruce Wayne. You can even go into the future. Batman Beyond is another story arc that is just dying to be touched, that no one's touching, but they just keep doing the same Batman Bruce Wayne. And that's why I'm really secretly hoping that Michael Keaton is Thomas Wayne, and it's something new, something that we haven't seen yet.
So does this also mean, like, can we get Jack Nicholson back as the Joker and pretend like Jared Leto never existed ever in any modern Batman universe?
Well, this is the right question to be asking. My dream now, I've become attached to this idea, is this new Flash movie, is he goes so fast that he goes back to the old Batman, where it's just Michael Keaton. Because Michael Keaton fought Jack Nicholson, right?
Yeah.
Do I have the timeline right?
Yeah.
And also, like, he was the one who fought Poison Ivy too, and like those were good Batman movies. So just it'd be cool. It'd be a nostalgia thing. It'd be a way to get older audiences interested again. Is like go back to that and have the Flash bombing around, being all smart alecky with these characters who have been gone for a while but are still the same characters. I think that could be a really cool idea. Would it be confusing still for the Flash to go back there and then come back and see Ben Affleck?
Confusing, though.
It'd be super confusing, but what we've seen, with all the time jumping of Avengers and stuff, it can be done. However, my concern at this point, the more we talk about this, is that DC is about to DC again in terms of like making a move that's splashy but just isn't right. Is my concern.
I think it can be done right, though, but they need to move away from Bruce Wayne.
Their track record at doing things right when you doubt them is like 0% at this point. like I can't think of a DC movie that I saw that wasn't the Chris Nolan movies that I was like, yeah, like even
Shazam was good.
You didn't like Wonder Woman?
Wonder Woman was good. I'm more thinking of like Justice League and Aquaman. Those were terrible. And like Batman vs Superman, terrible. Suicide Squad could have been really good, not that good. Like it just, they've really struggled. And yeah, Wonder Woman was a success, but it feels like an exception to the rule at this point. Shazam I didn't see, in fairness, but Shazam also feels totally different to me. I don't know if that's just because I haven't seen it, but
well, I mean, Shazam approached the character the right way, in the way that DC has not been approaching any of their characters. They introduced Shazam and gave him a backstory and made you care about the character before just popping him into an ensemble movie and being like, hey, this guy has powers.
And we've talked about this time and time again of like the reason Justice League didn't work, whereas Avengers did, was Avengers took the time to like, here's these characters, where Justice League was like, okay, these characters are all superpowers, you get the deal. They're together. You don't know any of them. You don't care about them. But look, they're fighting, Steppenwolf, and you're like, what? So I'm worried that they're putting the cart before the horse again when I see them saying, okay, Flash is getting his first movie and we're casting Michael Keaton as Batman. Like, it's like, okay, well, it's supposed to be a Flash movie, right? Why is Batman suddenly involved again? So yeah, I don't know. We'll see what happens. That movie isn't supposed to come out for a while, as far as I know. But Michael Keaton's going to be in it. I do like Michael Keaton too. I want to make it clear, I take no pleasure in shitting on Michael Keaton. It's not my thing.
Well, he's done nothing wrong.
He's done nothing wrong. I'm sure they came to him and were like, do you want a large, dump truck of money to back into your house and just dump it on your living room floor? And he's like, yeah, sure.
Well, I think he genuinely liked playing Batman too. I mean, I can't remember when it was, but I know he gave like a college commencement speech, and he ended it by saying something along the lines of like, the two most important words I've ever said in my life, I will share with you right now, and then said, Batman, and then walked away. Yeah. So I think he genuinely likes the character, and I think he would do the character justice because he already has, but it's so convoluted right now. It's just so convoluted.
So I'm reading more about this as we're talking. I'm reading an article on The Wrap. Apparently, the film's title was announced at Comic-Con. Well, I don't know. Ironically, it doesn't say it here. I think it's just called The Flash. But apparently, it's loosely based on the 2011 DC Comics crossover event, Flashpoint, in which Barry Allen travels back in time to prevent the death of his mother. So
that's what I'm hoping for.
Interestingly, yeah, it says the result. Barry Allen inadvertently creates another universe protected by Michael Keaton's Batman, now 30 years older. So maybe that is what we're talking about here, is he's still Batman. He went back in time, but it's the Michael Keaton Batman. So yeah, there's possibilities here about who else can get involved. But long story short, this is starting production in Q1 2021, so it's quite a ways away. I'm sure this is not the last time we'll be talking about this, but congrats to Michael Keaton, I guess.
AKA Thomas Wayne, calling it now.
Yeah, you're on record, my friend. Let's continue with well, I guess this isn't a movie, it's a show, but we should talk about Foundation. This trailer was released on Apple TV for Apple TV Plus, I think yesterday at the time of the recording of this. Guys, it looks so cool. Like I don't know exactly what else to say about it other than that it's the thing that has me most interested in like getting Apple TV Plus. Don't think I will, but it's a sci-fi story by Isaac Asimov, by the co-writer of Batman Begins and The Dark Knight, and it looks like it has some good people in it. Jared Harris, I'm a big fan of, who appears to be one of the leads, and it's supposedly this story that like inspired Star Wars, and it's been around for ages and ages. People have tried to make it 100 times, but they haven't been able to. I don't know. What was your guys' take on this one?
So I've actually been very impressed with Apple TV Plus. I think we've watched 4 shows on Apple TV Plus at this point, and they've all had super high production value. And the storytelling, I mean, in some of the shows it was a little bit lacking, but I would say probably 3 out of 4 was pretty solid. So I'm very excited about this because I think they have the money behind this show to make it look good. I mean, obviously the trailer, it looked phenomenal. I mean, it looked like very otherworldly, very spacey sci-fi, which is exactly how I expected it to look. And it seems like they have a pretty great cast involved. I think, honestly, the platform that it's on might do the show a little bit of a disservice because I don't know how many people have Apple TV Plus, but this honestly looks like if it has a big enough reach, it could be something on the level of Game of Thrones. And I feel like there's been that void where there hasn't really been like a fantasy or sci-fi television show that has really been accessible to most normal people the way that Game of Thrones was. And by normal, I mean like people who aren't super nerdy and really into that kind of stuff. And I feel like this,
I don't know,
might
Westworld
be it. Yes, that's true.
Westworld is my counter. Where I've never watched Westworld, so maybe that in itself should say that I'm wrong. But I know a lot of people that love Westworld, and I think it scratches a similar itch, at least in the sci-fi sense.
I had actually forgotten about that. But I still think there's a little bit of a void because I know a lot of people just straight up canceled HBO after Game of Thrones ended. So
right.
It'll be interesting. I really hope this takes off because it looks freaking awesome. Techtic, I don't know if you have any thoughts.
It looked like a lot of stuff. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of really good cinematic value, but I have no idea what's going on. I didn't read the book, and I couldn't really get a good feel of the plot line enough to really say if I'm excited for it or if I even know if I'm going to be able to follow it. So I'd like to see more before I really comment on it further.
The production value looks super high. The gist I got, which could be totally wrong, I'm sure people are going to show up on our Twitter and be like, no, you idiot. But Jared Harris knows psychohistory, which apparently is a way to tell the future. And he is going to get arrested because he can see the future and people don't like the future. So he tries to like impart his psychohistory wisdom on this female character who then has a number of adventures. That's my broad strokes understanding of it. Could be totally wrong. But I suppose this is a good time for us to shout out our Twitter folks. Guys, hit us up on Twitter. Tell us how we're wrong, why we're wrong, when we're wrong. Basically, anytime we're wrong, just say something. I am at OWLeague86. We have at OW Techtic, at OW Nerdbomber, and of course, our main account at Online Warriors 1. Hit us up. We love to chat with you about all things, not just Foundation. Yeah, this again, Apple TV Plus is a tough one for me. I don't see it happening, but if ever it were, I probably would watch this. I don't know off the top of my head when this one comes out. I can Google it up. 2021 is all it says right now. Coming in 2021. So I guess we'll see past that point. We can now shift away into there's one more movie we should talk about, which is Over the Moon. And I don't want to hype it, but I know Techtic has a lot of thoughts about this one. Very cute animated movie coming to Netflix. I want to say later this year sometime. Has a real Pixar. It's not Pixar, but has a real Pixar vibe. Basically, this girl. It's kind of the melancholy that Pixar, tends to make hay with. This girl loses her mother, her mother used to tell her this story about this moon spirit, I guess, and the girl thinks that her mom is on the moon with the moon spirit, so she figures out how to go to the moon, essentially. Very cute trailer. I'd advise everyone look it up. Could be a feel good, if not kind of sad.
Yeah, I think it's going to be ultra depressing.
Kind of
For me, I thought it had a lot of dark undertones for adult audiences, and what I mean by that is the moon was an obvious metaphor for death or the afterlife.
Like heaven is what I was thinking.
Yeah, and in the movie, it shows that the children visit this place, and throughout the whole time, the child is trying her best to get to the moon. So what I think happened, and that's why I said it's incredibly dark, I think at some point along the way, the child was in this really dark place and ends up hurting herself. Like, not intentionally, but like gets hurt severely trying to get to the moon, where she's in a coma. And so all of that, what you see of her on the moon, I think is her in a coma, and then she's just dreaming, and then eventually would wake to and say, hey, I saw a mom, and all these heartfelt moments. But like, that's really dark and like really sad.
It's not what Pixar would do. Like when I saw this, I was like, okay, so it's very similar to Coco, where Coco deals a lot with the theme of death and, going to the other side kind of thing. Like you said, the moon is kind of an obvious metaphor for the afterlife. But I never once thought, well, the girl is in a coma or dead herself, and it says that's next level stuff, man.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's a decent theory. I just don't know if Netflix will go that hard. And I guess I don't really have a lot of experience with other Netflix animated movies. And I don't know how hard they lean into like making sure there's a feel-good ending, or being like Pixar where they do play with your emotions a little bit more. I do I do agree that obviously it's going to address tonal things like death, but I don't know how dark and deep they'll go into it. I think they'll maybe try to take like a lighter tone eventually, because it does seem like there's a lot of there's like a colorful montage, kind of like a highlight reel of stuff at the end of the trailer that you see. So I'm not sure how dark it'll go, but I think either way, it looks really good. And I'm super excited with the direction that Netflix animated movies seems to be going, because I get a super Pixar feel from this entire trailer. And to me, that's a good thing, because so far I have yet to be disappointed by a Pixar movie. I like having diversity of studios out there to give me more of that. Just
to be clear, I don't think it's going to be openly dark. I think it's going to be the metaphors behind things that are very dark, personally.
We'll see. I so much color is like, visually speaking, there's a lot of vibrance going on. So I'm into it. This is another one that I have to Google when it's supposed to come out. I would assume the lead time on this one is much less, simply because it's a Netflix thing. Apparently there was a movie called Over the Moon that was made in 1939. That was the first thing that came up when I Googled. It just says expected 2020 post-production on IMDb's page, so no update on that, but coming soon, I guess, is what we'll say for now. We're running a little bit short on time as we move further into the news, so we're going to cover the tech stuff in a much more rapid-fire kind of way. First things first, and this one I don't think requires a whole lot of fanfare. Guys, like a year ago, how long ago was it when we talked about Mixer? Microsoft tried to make a Twitch competitor, and they signed Ninja to a very large contract. And I don't know if at the time we leveled skepticism of like, Microsoft's not going to beat Twitch. There's no way. Well, they didn't. It's shutting down effective June 22nd. Ninja's getting all of his money paid out to him, along with some other... July 22nd, sorry. Ninja's getting all of his money paid out to him, which I think the contract was pretty significant. I don't know exactly what the details were. But essentially all the partners, Ninja and Shroud are the two big ones who had huge deals. Yeah, this is the first time I've even heard about Mixer since we talked about Mixer starting. So if I had to guess what went wrong, it was the marketing. I don't know. Do you have thoughts?
One of the things that Phil Spencer said about this was that they started behind everyone else, behind the competition, when they created Mixer. And Mixer's actually been around for quite a while now. It was just last year that they signed Ninja to the exclusivity deal that kind of made waves. But Mixer actually started as a service called Beam, which then got bought by Microsoft, and they changed the branding, and they basically integrated it with the Xbox One ecosystem. So basically every time you turn on your Xbox One, there was like a now streaming tab, or if you looked up a game, they would show now streaming, and you would basically see people playing on Mixer. And so I think they thought that the integration with the Xbox ecosystem would help them, but unfortunately, I don't think enough people used it. And it's kind of too bad because the technology behind Beam to begin with was pretty great. They were, I think, one of the first ones to try to reduce that lag time between what the streamer saw and then what the audience saw on the website. So it made things like Jackbox a lot easier to play, and it was a little bit more interactive with the audience. But I think it was just poorly marketed, poorly mismanaged. And the weird thing here is that they're actually partnering with Facebook Gaming, and they're transitioning basically all of their Mixer partners and their streamers over to Facebook Gaming. And basically all of the Mixer websites and all of the apps will start redirecting to Facebook Gaming, which just seems like a little bit of an odd move. And I kind of feel bad. So like, obviously Ninja and Shroud, they got their full payout and they can go wherever they want. And they basically made out like bandits because they made a bunch of money for 1 year of their contract. But like these small streamers who built up an audience of like thousands of people, how do you tell people and how do you get that audience to follow you to another website when it seems like the Mixer community is now going to scattershot across a bunch of different platforms?
It's a great question. You mentioned Beam. I didn't know Beam existed until you said, like, it might be because I don't have an Xbox One. It sounds like you're saying a lot of the stuff is advertised through Microsoft's existing infrastructure, which would make sense. Mm-hmm. But I don't know the answer to that. It's interesting you mentioned Facebook as being the place all this is getting funneled into, because that's our other piece of tech news is they recently bought is it called Ready at Dawn Studios. This is the developer behind the popular Lone Echo series of VR games, one of Oculus's most successful series. So Facebook, of all companies, really putting their shoulder into gaming, which I have to be honest, I don't get. I don't understand that at all.
Facebook owns Oculus. So to me, this move does make a little bit of sense because right now Oculus doesn't have a lot of exclusive developers. They don't really have a ton of first-party games. I know Insomniac had been creating some Oculus exclusives prior to getting completely bought by Sony. And so this is almost like the opposite because I believe Ready at Dawn was owned by Sony at one point. And I know they made the Order 1886 for Sony as well. That was a PS4 exclusive.
Yep.
But that kind of bombed. So Sony cut them loose. And then they ended up doing all of their VR stuff. So it's kind of like a reverse Insomniac here where Oculus now pretty much has the rights to all of their stuff moving forward. And I mean, I guess it does make sense to me because if Oculus wants to be competitive in the VR space, they are going to have exclusive games because I don't know what drives people to buy one headset over another at this point. Like for me, PlayStation makes sense because I have a PSVR and I have a PlayStation and I don't have to invest $1,000 into a machine to run it. But for PC gamers, I don't know how you make that decision. And I think a lot like consoles, if you have exclusive titles, especially with Valve coming out with Half-Life, I feel like they need to have something to compete with that.
I will say, I love my PSVR. The Oculus full, especially, I had a friend who had the Oculus like full room setup. It's unreal. It's a step up. And this was a few years ago. But again, like you said, from a cost standpoint, Oculus is also ridiculous. So I'm inclined to agree. The choice of a VR headset seems, I don't want to say arbitrary, but it's just, it's hard to make as informed a decision about that as you would about which console to buy. So I guess the jury's still out, and I guess Facebook is making money moves. Technic, anything to add to any of this before we move on?
I mean, like Nerdbomber said, it makes sense for them to acquire them and to keep building up their Oculus base. But for me, until they lower the price to entry, it's still kind of a moot point.
Right, for sure. So this is, again, no real date associated with this. They bought a company. Mixer is a date associated with it. July 22nd is when Mixer shuts down. So be advised, Mixer folks out there. Right now, we're going to move into the penultimate segment of the show, which is called What Are You Up To Wednesday, where we talk about what we've been up to. We'll keep it a little bit on the shorter side, because I think we're getting fairly close on our time. Mine is short anyways. Guys, The Last of Us part 2. I mean, no spoilers. I'm not going to be that guy. I don't even know how far into the game I am. But given that The Last of Us is one of my favorite games, maybe my favorite game of all time, the fact that I can't even say, whether this is, it's close to as good is my point. I can't immediately discount it as being not as good. That alone is a ringing endorsement for the game. If you're on the fence, if you're thinking they can't possibly repeat what they've done, think again and go get it as soon as you can. One of the better story experiences I've had, with the exception of The Last of Us. Huge fan. The only other thing I would mention is this ridiculous Netflix show that my girlfriend and I have started watching called The Floor is Lava. Have you guys heard of this?
Heard of it, haven't watched it.
We've watched a few episodes. It's ridiculous. It's as ridiculous. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's a game show where the floor is lava. It's pretty funny. It's very low, what's the word? Low impact. It's just you put it on and it happens to you and you don't really care that much. But for what it is, it's perfect. So check it out. Nerdbomber, what do you have for us today?
So in the past couple of weeks, we've actually started and finished 2 shows. One was Love Life, and that was on HBO Max, which I discovered that I get for free through my cable provider. So we watched that. That's the new show starring Anna Kendrick, and it basically walks through every episode is like a little portrait of one of the relationships in her life. And it works from the beginning basically to the end. The last episode is her final relationship. And initially, it wasn't as rom-com-y as I was kind of hoping it would be, because the episodes were honestly a little kind of depressing. I mean, obviously you went into the show knowing that at the end of every episode, something would happen that would break that couple up that you had just invested like half an hour into watching. But a lot of the show felt super, super real. And I guess that's credit to some of the writing and that's credit to Anna Kendrick's acting. But it really, a lot of the issues that they tackled throughout the show, it wasn't even necessarily like couple love. They tackled her relationship with her mother. That was an entire episode. They tackled her relationship with her best friend who is facing addiction and her struggle to try to get her friend to go to rehab. And that was an insanely real episode. And even just watching her develop and grow as a character and learn how to love herself and recognize her own flaws and what she wanted in her life and how she wanted to move forward and be an adult was very interesting. So it wasn't my favorite watch of the year, but it was a very unique show and definitely would give it a try if you have access to HBO Max. I don't know if I would go out of my way to subscribe to it just to watch it, but if you have it, wouldn't be not worth your time. The other show that we watched was Space Force on Netflix. And
we're almost done with that one ourselves. We took a break.
I was a little disappointed. I don't know how you felt. It was fine.
It's so meh. Yeah, it's it could be so much better. It's not offensive,
exactly.
But it kind of happens. It's similar to the show I mentioned. It kind of happens to you, and you're like, yeah, all right. And it just goes by you. And for the people it has, it should be way better.
I don't know what you thought about it, but basically, Illeagle, you're right on the money. For the comedic talent that they have in the show, it should be so much better than what it is. And there are some one-liners where you're like, that's kind of funny. But at the end of the day, something just didn't hit home, and I don't really know what it was. I can't put my finger on it. It was just okay.
Yeah, my favorite character is the head scientist. And
easily the best character is
you'd think there'd be a lot more back and forth where you'd have like a cast that you're in love with, but it's just kind of him standing alone on an island that I think is making the show good.
They have a cast, but very few. He's by far the most likable. Everyone else you either feel nothing towards,
and he's not supposed to be likable. That's the crazy part. He's supposed to be this cynical guy.
Yeah, he's supposed to be the foil for Steve Carell's character for sure, and he serves that purpose fairly well. But Steve Carell, I see what he was trying to do. I don't know. I guess it didn't work out. Yeah.
Well, it's one of those things.
Mini review.
He tried to kind of channel the Michael Scott character in the military, but
I don't know if he did.
Well, it's like a toned down version of Michael Scott where he's a little bit of a buffoon, but he has some good qualifications that make him a leader. And he made him a little bit more serious to fit the military type setting. But in my opinion, you don't get to be that high up. You don't get to head up an entire division of the military unless you're somewhat competent.
Well,
and he seemed like
I think that's the joke.
Well, yeah.
Right?
But like it was, the buffoonery was a little bit too in your face. Like I needed more subtle buffoonery. And I think when it came to a head for me was when he was trying to talk a space monkey into fixing a ship. It was just a satellite. It was just like, I can't really buy that any general, even the stupidest one, would think this is a good idea.
Well, and he's got this like army man voice thing going on, which is also a little bit over the top. And I don't know. I like The Office is great for many reasons, but one reason that I can think of is that they make this character, Michael Scott, who is an absolute unmitigated horse's ass for like every episode he is on, right? He makes a whole bunch of terrible decisions. He rubs people the wrong way constantly, does things that are very politically incorrect that probably wouldn't fly today all the time. But somehow the show still finds a way to get you to empathize with him and to root for him. And I haven't finished the show yet, Space Force, but not once have I been like, I hope that things work out for this, Mark Naird guy. I could care less. And that's the indictment to me. Wow, you kind of came down hard on it. It's it's not bad. It's just
okay.
It's just okay, I guess is the thing. Techtic, what you got anything to add?
Sure. In addition, we have started rewatching Avatar: The Last Airbender. You've probably seen some tweets floating around with that. It is in preparation for when inevitably the live action one comes out, the alleged good live action one. And so far, I am loving every second of rewatching it. I even took a quiz and found out that my personality jives with Aang. So watch out, world.
That's huge. Well, there you have it. So we're going to head now into the last segment of the show where I give you guys a quiz. And in this case, the topic is the periodic table of elements, something that we all had nightmares about in middle school or high school. I don't know when I took chemistry. And now it's back to haunt you yet again. So I'm going to give you guys a few questions. I don't have a set number in mind. We'll just see where the road takes us. I think they're all going to be Price is Right style questions. And we'll take it from there. Most of them are going to be about the structure of the periodic table of elements. So get hyped for that. First, and probably the question you expected me to ask, Price is Right style, when did Mendeleev first publish the first recognizable periodic table? What year?
I honestly have no idea. I clearly did not pay attention.
If you go too late, you bust.
I feel like, was this in AD or BC? I'm just going to throw something out there. I'm going to say 1200.
I thought that was actually...
Yes.
I thought that was actually a really good answer. I'm going to say 1400.
Okay. You guys are off to an absolutely brilliant start. Guys, the Civil War was over before the periodic table was published. 1869 is... Are
you serious?
I am stone cold serious.
I thought there was like a rudimentary version of the periodic table, and then they just like added on to it.
Yeah, because
later.
people knew elements, like they knew what they were.
So maybe it was just like a 5-row chart, but that's still a table.
Well, either way, I get
new elements, but they weren't in the chart. Yeah, Techtic gets the point. Off to a roaring start. Next question, very similar. How many elements are currently in the periodic table? And Tactic, you'll start on this one.
Oh, you have to let me think then. I have to visualize it.
Right. It's the kind of thing, that's the joy of this, is it's the kind of thing you should be able to think about and be like, oh, yes, okay. But no, it is not so.
Can we put a timer on this?
Come on there, T-Dog.
75 elements.
75. Nerdbomber, over to you.
Oh, boy. I was going to say 70, but I don't want to be right on top of you like that, so I'm going to say 76.
Gross.
Giggity.
This one goes to Nerdbomber. It's 118. Not too far off.
I was getting rushed, but I didn't finish counting a bunch of columns.
It's 118. Well, you're going to love one of my future questions. In fact, let's do that question right now. How many groups are there in the periodic table? So now you can think about it. There's 118 elements, right? So you should be able to work this out. How many groups are there?
Are the groups the columns? Dude, I don't remember my chemistry.
I'm not going to tell you whether the group is the column or the row because you should know that.
crud. Okay, I'm going to say, I think there's 12. I think they're the columns, and I think there's 12. Maybe.
Okay. Tactic, over to you.
I think she busted. I believe there's 8.
Okay. It is columns, and Nerdbomber did not bust. She was, in fact, quite low. It's 18. So far, this is just, you guys are learning a lot about how much you don't know about the periodic table. So Nerdbomber's up to 2 points.
Isn't it metals, non-metals, noble gases?
Those are like groups or something.
So
or
what are
families.
you talking about?
I don't, literally the columns.
The groups are the columns. I'll let that sink in while I ask the next question.
Which I don't understand why they did that. Like, just call them columns, man. They don't need to be called groups.
Well, I think I don't know exactly off the top of my head, but I think the columns share certain properties that make them columns.
They do.
Of the 118 elements on the table, how many are naturally occurring? As in, they were not created in a lab. Tactic, you start on this one.
75.
Okay, and Nerdbomber.
I want to say it's 25. I feel like, wasn't it like the first few columns or groups or whatever?
Okay. It's 94.
Okay, I was clearly wrong.
Almost every element you see
it's just
on
the bottom row that is created in the lab.
That's essentially correct. The bottom row, and I think the two that are split out from the main body of the table are the ones that are
There's
not
some
lab-created.
significance to like the leftmost columns, and I don't remember what it is, but there was a significance.
Noble gases.
Was that what it was?
It's the rightmost column is the noble gases. The leftmost column, I don't know off the top of my head.
What is that, the most metally metals?
I think that might be
something like that. It's maybe alkali metals.
Bottom left is your
whatever.
francium.
That's
Good
correct.
stuff.
Good job. So we're gonna. It's tied 2-2. I think we've reached ahead here in terms of how little you guys know about the periodic table. So I'm gonna ask one more winner take all question, and we're actually gonna depart the actual structure of the table because clearly we've run the gambit on that.
That's what we don't know a lot about. Is we can't
instead,
visualize it.
I'm going to tell you that the let's you know what? Let's do a 2-point question. How about that? Make it interesting. What is the heaviest element on the periodic table, and what is its atomic weight? Take a moment.
Who's is it?
Think
me?
it over. I believe it's Nerdbomber first because this is the 5th question.
Well, golly,
I will say it's easy for me to say this while reading it, but you're going to know when I say it. It's going to jog your memory. Both of the answers, have an echo in my brain of like, at one point I knew this very deeply.
I'm just going to take a shot in the dark for which is the heaviest, and I'm just going to say lead because I don't have a better answer. And what was the second part of the question?
What's the atomic weight? Which at this point is a little crapshoot. Yeah. Pick a number that sounds good.
Let's go with that's too much. Okay. Let's go with 50.
Okay, Tactic.
The heaviest is 138, and I think it is francium.
Okay, so francium, I believe, is actually the one that has the smallest atomic radius, and that's why it's in that bottom corner. And I think what you're thinking of, the answer is uranium, is the heaviest.
Uranium.
And it has that's true. The atomic weight is 238. So Tactic takes it home by a nose.
I remembered the 38. That's what was in my head.
See, I remember there being a U-232. That's an element, I'm pretty sure, right? There's like a derivative of uranium or something that only weighs 232, but
I think by derivative you might mean isotope.
Sure.
Kids, learn your periodic table. That's the takeaway here.
Dude, I have not used chemistry in years.
In case you're ever asked about it on a podcast, you'll look better than we do if you just take the time and sit down and learn it. But Tactic takes this one home. Congrats to him. He will host the quiz next week. Nerdbomber, thanks for playing. And that's the end of our episode. So we thank you for showing up, for listening to us ramble about the news. If you liked our rambling, you can, of course, hit us up on Twitter, as we've already said. You can also hit us up on Apple Podcasts. Leave us a review. We'd love to hear from you. So with that in mind, we shall leave you to your devices until next week. Thanks for stopping by.
See you next week.